everyone, how's it going? So I've been doing a lot of mock interviews lately, and I noticed a lot of common mistakes that candidates keep making when they're applying for a master's or a PhD. And I thought, you know what, let me make a video about this, because if this keeps coming up, I'm sure a lot of you are also making these mistakes. So let's talk about it. By the way, if you want to do a mock interview with me, you can contact me on Instagram or send me an email. I'll also be launching my website soon, so you'll be able to just book an order with me straight away. So yeah, if you think that'll be helpful before your interview, do get in touch. Okay, so the very first place people mess up, and it's usually the first question that you're even asked, which is, tell us about yourself. When they say tell us about yourself, they want to know very specifically, tell us why you're applying to this, or what is the background you have that makes you suited for this role. So for example, if you're applying for a PhD in politics, for example, you want to frame it as a little bit about your education, a little bit more about your research experience, and why you're applying to this program. So these three things. A lot of candidates give a lot of, background, unnecessary information that has nothing to do with what you're applying to. For PhD, for example, the most common mistake I see is people not linking their research experience, them not highlighting their research experience. For example, say you have some varied background, you are a CEO. This is, actually a person I did a mock interview with, and now you're applying for an MSc, okay? Now, you are a CEO, yes, you could talk a lot about that experience, but that's not really what they're interested in. What they're interested in is sort of how your experience and your background links to the master's, okay? Or another candidate that I interviewed was a cardiologist, and she was applying to now a research program. Again, she was talking more about like her medical career and her specialization and things like that, but I was like, no, that's not what I need. You're here for a research program now. I want to know, what kind of research experience do you have? What kind of projects did you do? What are you interested in terms of research? That's what the tell us about yourself is about. Always link it to the degree you're doing. Okay, so another candidate started mentioning a lot about their like volunteering experience and things like that, which makes you a great person and a great like candidate in general. But if you don't mention your research experience and you're applying for a PhD, you've already sort of, started off on a bad note with your interview. So for example, say you're that medical doctor and now you're applying for a PhD, so you could mention something like, I've trained as a cardiologist, and I became really interested in research while I was doing this side project and looking at this is this and this is this, and I really enjoyed it, and I realized how important it is for doctors to have research experience, and that's why I'm applying to this PhD. So something like that, or if you're a CEO, you could say, oh, I've been a CEO for this company for a really long time, and I wanted to apply for an MSc because I realized that I could improve more on my biological background and understand more about this field in terms of academic knowledge. So that's kind of like the tell us about yourself bit. Make sense? Okay, and another related mistake, which is kind of linked to this, is that when they ask you why you're applying to this or what makes you suited for this role, not mentioning specific experiences. So I've seen so many candidates which have like amazing research projects on their CV and in their personal statements, but they don't even talk about them in the interview. So every time you're about to give an answer about why you're interested in this field, why you're interested in this project, why you're interested in doing a PhD, you want to bring in specific experiences, and this is a chance for you to highlight your research skills. So for example, you could say something like what makes you interested in this project, okay? You want to link it to your experience because that is the most solid proof. You want to say something like, when I was working on my MSc research project on looking at the legal frameworks in Mexico, I got really interested, or I noticed this gap in the research, or I noticed that no one really had been researching this, and therefore I got really interested in this project. Or say something like, yeah, so I've actually been doing very similar research for my master's research project. I was looking at the field of this, and actually evaluating whether this, just give a little bit of a hypothesis and a little bit about what you were trying to find out, and then say, and that made me really interested in this field, and the project that you're offering goes very well in line with my research interests and also my experience, and that's why I'm applying to this. Another way I see this mistake popping up is when I asked a candidate, why are you interested in research? What excites you about research? And she said, oh, I love discovering things, I love writing, I love reading, literature review, etc., etc. But these are like very broad things, and anybody can say that. It's very general and generic. Again, you want to bring in your experience and say, oh, actually, when I was working on this research project and I was looking at the functional changes of this protein, I realized how much I enjoyed writing up my results, and I presented them in a conference, and I realized I really enjoyed science communication. I also wrote a research paper that was very enjoyable to actually communicate my findings, put things in a report. Where there was another candidate who put up this fantastic report of like 20 pages, something about all the gaps in the legal framework in Mexico or something like that, but she never mentioned that in the interview. And I was looking at her CV, and her CV looked excellent, but that stuff, you need to bring that into the interview. And so I told her, this is what you need to bring in. Don't just say I love reading and writing. Say, I created a report of like almost 20 pages, and it was very comprehensive, and I loved that experience of thinking, critical analysis, and doing literature reviews, and putting that all into an organized format and presenting it as a report. That was something I really enjoyed about research. Give them from your experience. That is proof. That is actual proof. Okay. So again, how do you answer these questions? Why should we choose you? What makes you suited to this PhD? What do you enjoy most about research? Why this project? Why a PhD? What is the most solid proof you can give for all these answers is talking about your experiences. So if you think about the interview in like one little thing that you need to do is talk about your experiences, and that's a way to answer literally every question. Okay, here's another thing I keep noticing with candidates that actually have to write a research proposal for their interview. So I know this isn't applicable to everyone, but if you do have to write a research proposal, know it well enough. Okay, if you have mentioned some kind of theory that you would want to utilize in your research, have a good understanding of it, okay? Because if it's a research proposal based application, they are going to want to discuss the research proposal in quite a lot of detail, so you have to know. And also, what I've noticed is a lot of candidates haven't really thought that deeply about their research question and what they really want to answer, or what is the gap in the field, or why are they answering this question in this way, thinking about their methodology, things like that. Or another thing, not really being able to explain what is the point of your research. Why do you want to do this research? Like, why is it even important? Okay, think of it like you're trying to convince a funding body why should they fund your research. Okay, so you can think about future impact. Okay, this is how this research is going to affect these people or this field or our understanding of this thing, so future impact. Think about very concrete things. Okay, or gap in the research, like why is it important for us to figure this out, or doing things a new way, maybe a new type of analysis, maybe you're developing a new technique. Like, why is it important? What is it going to tell us? Okay, does it solve a problem? Does it maybe identify a problem? So really, the point of your research. What is the point of your research? Be able to talk about that and convince the interviewer that you know why this research is important, because that's going to help you stick to the PhD when things get really tough. If you have a strong why do I need to do this, then you're going to keep, you're going to keep at it and you're going to stick to it. This also conveys your interest, so when they ask you why are you interested in this project, again, these are the kinds of things you can talk about there. What is the point of this research, and you're interested because it's really important. And that's a great way to convey interest, because that is like one of the main things they want to see in an interview, is skills but also interest. Okay, both of these things are so important. Okay, number 4, one thing I have noticed in quite a lot of mock interviews now that I've done is people don't talk about themselves enough. Okay, I know sometimes people get awkward talking about themselves, but that's what the interview is for. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to be okay with that. And they start to bring like other people in. So for example, one candidate said something like, they were talking about their research project, and then they said, oh, and then I got this data from my supervisor and then I analyzed it, blah blah blah. And because of the way they phrased it, I thought that all the data that they analyzed was from their supervisor. They didn't actually collect any data from their own experiments or their own work. Then later when I asked him, wait, so this wasn't like your project from start to finish? And then I realized, no, it was a very small part that he got from his supervisor, but the rest was his. But just because he brought the supervisor in, and the way he phrased it made it seem like he didn't do any of the work. So it's actually kind of risky, when you are sort of nervous under interview conditions and you don't always phrase your sentences properly. If you bring other people in, there's always a risk, and you don't just think it's about you. Why would you bring other people in? Or let's say other things in. For example, the Mexico legal framework candidate that I was helping, she started giving a lot of information about the background of how laws work or law schools work in Mexico. And I thought, no, you've just wasted 3-4 minutes of your interview talking about Mexico and law schools, whereas it's supposed to be about you. I want to know about you. So talk about your research proposal, your like, what do you want to do about the law school or the legal framework in Mexico? I don't want to know all the background. That's not what the interview is for, okay? Yeah, so tell them what you did, how you contributed, what impact you had, from your previous experiences, your research projects, things like that. Make it about yourself. Every single, minute that you spend talking about something other than yourself and your experience or your interest or why you want to do this is a minute wasted, and it's a minute that could have been better spent convincing them that you're the person for this job. So do not do that. And another thing that's related to that is waffling and giving very sort of long-winded answers and not getting to the point, quick enough. I would say start with the point that you're trying to make. Start with it. Don't give this whole backstory, blah blah blah. It's an interview, not your friend. Don't be talking like, how we talk with friends. Don't be doing that, because you will get cut off. Okay, have you seen like some of these interviewers? Like, you'll be talking mid-sentence, they'll be like, okay, and they'll move on to the next question, and you'll be like, what, hold on, I didn't get to make my point. So just make your point. And as an example, let me give you, I asked an interviewee, what's a time that you overcame a challenge in your research? Okay, tell me about that. So she started giving this whole background information about how she was trying to access this archival data and there was no information on where the institution was, and something about like how she tried to find it on Google Maps and things like that. At the end of the day, the important thing to start with was that she found a creative way to find the data that she needed and find the institution that had the archival data that she was looking for. But she took like 3 minutes or something explaining the whole background, and I was, listening, because I give candidates enough time just to see how they get to the point. But in the actual interview, they won't do that. So, you should start with the solution. Like, so Yeah, one challenge I had, which I overcame, was to find the right institution with the archival data, and then maybe you can talk about the actual problem. Or, for example, if it's a lab based research project, you can say something like, during the troubleshooting of my experiments, I found a creative solution to make the Western blots better. Okay, and then say, well, because this was happening and I was facing this and this protein, it wasn't showing up on the Western blots, blah blah blah, and then I read the literature and then I did this and then I found out, this is what I could do, or change the conditions, or optimize the stuff, blah blah blah. You get the point, but you got to start with the point. So any question that they ask you, just answer it straight away. Don't waffle, don't blah blah blah. Even if you maybe, just think like 5 seconds about it, and the main point that you want to convey, and just start with that. Okay, yeah, another sample sentence is like, oh yeah, I had this one time where I had to think about outside the box and really take the initiative to drive my own learning. So I used online bioinformatics courses to learn how to do regression analysis, because there was no one in my lab who was doing bioinformatics, so I was responsible for my own learning. So you see how you can literally give them a lot in just maybe, 30 seconds or a few sentences. And that is really gonna help you. So those are the 5 common things I've noticed. I hope this was useful. If you did find it useful, please do like the video or comment, because that really helps the YouTube algorithm share it and recommend it to other people. And also, if you want to do a mock interview with me, then keep a lookout for my website. In the meantime, you can send me an email or contact me on Instagram. So yeah, I'll catch you in another video. Bye!